adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast, coming to you today with an all-new type of D&D session. Session 0, the same great D&D session, but with 0 added sugar. My name is Martin O'Dwyer, and I'll be your host for today. And joining me, as always, is your host, Conor O'Brien. How are we doing today, Conor? Did you like that one, did you?
I think that was one of the better intros we've had. Like, definitely, of the 50-plus episodes we've done, that's definitely maybe in the top 5, I think.
Oh, really?
And also, that was flawlessly delivered as well. Well done.
Oh, thank you. A job in shitty... Oh, no, I swore already. Damn it. Sorry, Conor. A job in crappy advertisements in the future for me as a voiceover, which actually wouldn't be bad. But yeah, how are we doing?
Not too bad. We didn't have our D&D game this week, but I did have a different D&D game that I ran for some friends of mine from school.
This is the one shot, yeah?
Sorry?
This is the one shot, yeah?
This is the one shot I ran, yeah.
Ooh, tell me more.
I have 3 kind of games going. I have a main game going. Mm-hmm. I ran a one shot a few weeks back with my sister, her boyfriend, and a friend of mine who'd never played before, and they really liked it. And I'm planning on making that into a 3-parter. We finished out that one shot as it was, but I have another couple ideas that will fill into the same quest line and stuff. And similarly, I had one there on just 2 days ago where I had some friends from school that came in. None of them ever played before either. No, sorry, that's not true. One of them had, but he played with me once about 3 years ago.
Okay.
In a one shot. So he actually used the same character, which is cool.
Continuity is always great.
Yeah. And yeah, it was really, really good. Some of them behaved or took to it exactly as I expected. Mm-hmm. One of them really surprised me in a really, really good way. Awesome. One of them, and I knew this because I know him as a friend, and I knew he would be this person. One of them was immediately... not in a way that made that session bad, but in a long-term campaign, I could see as would not be constructive. Is that he would be my problem player, because he takes a very competitive, because they all know each other. I think if I put him in a group with 3 other people he didn't know, he'd be fine. But because he knows the lads and they're proper lads, so they'll kind of like, you know, make jokes and slag each other and stuff like that. And they have that kind of competitive nature. They were all kind of like taking jabs at each other, but in a fun way. It was light. And also, like, there was a couple times where they opened a chest at one point, and he was the guy who opened it, and he tried to grab all the stuff and go, "Oh, I'll keep all that." So, and I'm like, "Okay, the rest of the lads see you take that." He's like, "That's fine, I don't care." And then, like, there was a bit at the end where they were getting paid, and he met up with this other person who was paying them for a side thing. And when he met up, she was like, "Here you go, 280 pieces." He's like, "Cool, 100 gold pieces. I'll share that with the lads." And he was going to skim the rest off the top. And I was like, right, okay. So immediately we have this player in the group. And everyone else at the table knows, but obviously their characters don't.
Oh man, so, I can just see, like, the second a magic item is introduced, that's going to cause war.
Yeah. What I would do in that case is I'd make it a cursed magic item.
Sorry, tunable only to someone who isn't acting the bollocks.
Yeah. But the others were great. One of my friends who played a fighter, he's the kind of guy now, he will pick something up, he wants to understand it, and he wasn't using like the right terminology, but he got why the rules were the way they were and why that makes sense. Like, I was trying to explain like armor class to him, and I'm like, so you have armor class based on how hard you are to hit, and then when you roll that with your strength, that's you trying to beat that number, basically. He's like, got it. So you're trying to like break their armor and stuff. And I'm like, you're not breaking it, so to speak, but yes, you're on the right track, you know? Yeah. So, but he was like, by the end of it, he was showing a couple of the other guys, and this is his first time playing, but at the end of it, he was showing a couple other people why they're rolling this, because it's here in their skills and stuff like that, and you're proficient with it here. So he caught on quite fast. And then my friend Diarmuid, at the start of the session, right, they met up with a couple of people, and they were like, they knew pretty early on, this is the job, right? We want you to go and find these orcs outside of town and get rid of them because they're harassing people on the roads and stealing and killing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they knew right away that was the job. The other 3 were like, cool, let's go do it. And then Diarmuid was like, I want to ask this person a couple questions, like basically the captain of the guard in town. And he kept asking like clarifying questions and doing all this, and he kept asking could he use his intuition, which he meant insight, but I knew what he meant. And I was like, yeah, sure, go for it, And a couple of them he got quite high, and I'm like, yeah, he seems like a stand-up fellow. But the lads were kind of getting like a little impatient, and they were like, "Can we just go? Let's just go. We know where we have to go. Let's just go." Which was really funny because they were giving him a lot of shit for that. I cursed as well. Only 5 minutes in. Damn it. They were giving him a lot of crap for that. There we go. And it's really funny then because eventually I had them arrive at the hideout for the orcs, which was in a ravine, and they had to climb down into the ravine using the ropes that the orcs themselves like tied up to the edge. And I described it to them as they arrived. I'm like, there's like 8 ropes, 2 of each color. There's blue, red, green, and yellow, all in pairs, just spaced out about 5 feet apart each. And they were like, cool. And like the 2 lads who were like really, really rushing were like, okay, let's just climb down. And then Diarmuid was like, no, wait, something's up here. And then they were like, oh, would you come on and let's just climb down? And he's like, no, but what if one of them falls or breaks or something like that? Something I don't know. I want to think about this for a second now. And then the other lads being impatient were like, okay, we climb down. I was like, okay, what color ones do you climb down? And the 2 lads were like, we both climb down on a blue. And I'm like, okay. And the third fellow was like, I'll climb down on the green. I think he's pretty passive. He wasn't rushing the whole ordeal, but he's like, I'll climb down one of the green ones.
Yeah.
I have in my notes that the reds and the greens are safe, but the yellows and the blues are not. So the 2 lads grab onto the blues. I describe it that 3 of them go over the ledge and climb down about 5 feet before the 2 blue ropes give out. And they just begin falling like 60 feet down into this ravine onto their backs. So
5d10 bludgeoning damage, boys.
It's so they ended up, they didn't roll too high. I think actually it was is it not d6s for fall damage?
Oh, it is d6s. Sorry, yeah.
But I had them rolling
30, not too bad. Like.
Yeah, they rolled. What happened was one of the guys, Diarmuid, was playing. As soon as they fell, Diarmuid was like, "I told you, I knew something was going on here," and he was just waiting at the top patiently. And as soon as one of them fell, he was playing a Psy Warrior. I almost said Psy Knight again, because it used to be called that. But he grabbed one of them with that, and I'm like, "Look, you can do this. I'll let you do this and grab one of them with your psionic movement ability, but you only have time to grab one." So he was like, "Oh, who do I let drop?" So he's like, "Okay, the ranger has less health than the fighter, so we let the fighter drop." Fighter dropped, took 21 points of damage, and he only has about 50 something. Okay. So he's like a good third of his health is gone. It was really funny because he was actually thinking like a D&D player should, where like let's check for, and he was even asking later on, let's check for more traps and let's scout ahead and do this. He was being cautious about it. He didn't want to just rush in anywhere, whereas a couple of the lads were like, and to be fair, they all got really tactical after a while. When they got into the actual hideout, and there was a couple of paths, and they were checking for traps, and they were listening to see if they could hear anyone up ahead and stuff, and they all got really into it and started making plans. But it was good. It was a good session. Here's the best part. You'll love this. So it seemed like it was just a regular. So it was my joke. This is the whole session was kind of my reversal of the blacksmith's daughter has been taken thing.
Okay.
She left with them because she's working with them. She's actually like acting as their leader because she has an intellect devourer in her head.
Oh.
And there's a mind flayer elsewhere in the area who is like puppeteering her, and she's also an orc as well. The blacksmith's an orc, his daughter's an orc, and so she is like puppeteering as the leader of this band of orc barbarians or bandits. So they kill the leader of that. They kill her, but not before they come into the room and she's standing behind this glowing pool of tadpoles, and they're like slipping tadpoles into all the people that they take from their raids on the road. And they heard from one of the prisoners of like, oh yeah, once they put that thing into you over the next few days, you just start losing it. And then when you get to a certain point and you're like not speaking and not responsive, that's when they just walk you out and bring you somewhere. I don't know where they bring you. And then they bring you elsewhere to be like converted,
Ceremoniosis.
But she was basically using a gladiator stat block, so she's quite high strength.
Yeah, it's a tanky daughter.
Yeah. Well, she's meant to be like 20 something, and she's also like, and then she was an adventurer herself before she got infected with the. I knew you were going to go there. But yeah, so she was an adventurer, and she was on an adventure when she got infected that way,
That's a 10-year-old joke I just told.
I know, yeah. Solid 10 years, like.
Oh God.
Um, but yeah, so what actually happened was the fight was going on. It was taking a while, but the lads were kind of holding their own.
What was the party? Class wise? Ranger,
Oh,
fighter.
Ranger, fighter. Okay, so Battlemaster,
Oh yes,
Ranger, Hunter, Psy Warrior, and Divine Soul Sorcerer.
Cool.
Who functioned as a good blaster and healer.
Yeah.
Although he had terrible luck with all his rolls all night. he took it really well, but he had really bad luck all night. So yeah, what happened was the fight was going on. They kind of decided partway through the fight that pool full of these little shrimpy things has to go. So they're like, okay, sorcerer, will you try and burn that? Also, this guy has some flame arrows that they found on the road on one of the carriages. Let's just try and set this thing on fire or whatever, you know? And they did, and it took some damage, but like there was still some left alive. One of them ran over. I think I described that the top surface, almost like an oil spill, had caught fire. So one of them ran over to light his arrows and fire them, and I let it happen. I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm like, it won't do. I said it'll do like a D4 fire, but not like, you know, full D8 for like the flame arrows would. He's like, yeah, that's fine, no worries, because they found out she was vulnerable to fire damage. Right. So he hit her a couple times. She immediately runs over on her turn, and he's a Dexy person, and she's a strength with like a plus. She had a +10 to athletics.
This is exactly what I'm fucking thinking. Oh, sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. This is exactly what I think is gonna happen, isn't it?
And then he's standing next to the pool, and she runs up and Spartan kicks him back into the pool of Micflayer tadpoles.
Oh God.
At which point I brought him into the other room, and I said, okay, here's the deal. They're going to try and infect you, so I'm going to have you roll a Constitution saving throw to try and resist it. And we checked, and he had like a +6. I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. Okay. You need to beat a 15, which is high,
very doable.
But very doable. And I'm like, but if you get, and here's the reason I brought you into the room. I said, regardless of whether you succeed or not, don't tell them what happened. Obviously, if you don't get infected, your character is going to say, I'm not infected. But even if you are infected, your character's still going to say, I'm not infected, to not arouse suspicion. So I said, but don't tell the guys that's in the other players what you, the player, rolled, whether you succeeded or not. And he said, oh, okay, so fair enough. So he rolled, he beat it, he got like 20-something. He beat that by a lot. I'm like, okay, but I said, remember, don't tell the others. The whole rest of the session, they were like they got so paranoid. They knew that people infected were like vulnerable to fire damage. So they were like, okay, I'm gonna burn your hand. Will you let me burn your hand? I want to see if you take extra damage from burning. And he was like, don't burn my hand though. Like, how much damage are you gonna do to me? And like because he was worried he'd take a lot of fire damage from it. And then eventually he's like, oh, you'll take like maybe 1 fire damage. And he's like, okay, I let it happen. So they heat up a dagger on the fire and they press it to his hand. And I'm like, okay, where normally you would take only 1 point of fire damage from this, you do. And they're like, oh, okay, so we don't think he's infected. And then I finished out the session after they killed Umi, was the name of the blacksmith's daughter. After they killed her, her body like kind of rides around on the ground a little bit. Her skull cracks open, and Intellect Devourer pops out, and the 2 nearest people are the 2 guys who are rushing the entire game. And I'm like, okay, the creature has no real choice, or not no choice, but no preference either way. Both of you are equally distant away. So I'll tell I pointed to 2 of them and I went odds, evens, and I rolled a d12, and it ended up being the fighter with a 6 intelligence. Or 7 intelligence, and I rolled 3d6, and if I beat that, it drops his into 0. He's catatonic, which he was.
Oh no!
So they had to drag him back to town, collect their reward, tell the blacksmith that his daughter is dead, and he was like, you know, look, I'm really upset, obviously, but I promised you that if you at least tried to bring her back, I would honor my agreement. I'll make you all new armor and weapons and stuff like that. Yeah. But the session ended with one of them being they know of a witch on the coast, a water witch, a sea witch on the coast, who will maybe help them. But it ended with the fighter being completely catatonic and unable to speak. And yeah, it was good. It was a mad session, but I never got to use tadpoles properly before though.
Very, very cool. Very, very cool. Did they kill the Intellect Devourer after it made him catatonic? Was it?
It did, yeah.
Okay. I was
It
wondering why it
blasted
didn't
him.
leap into his skull, as they're wont to do.
I think if I remember rightly, the ability is that if they're dropped to zero, it can teleport into your skull.
Yeah.
So if you're on zero HP, but he wasn't on zero HP,
Oh, okay.
his
Sorry.
int was reduced to zero.
Took the wrong
Um,
way. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They did the two abilities, but yeah, it did that, and then just tried to make a beeline out of the cave, and the two archers just immediately shot it with two arrows and dead. Because it only has like 20 odd health or something like that, or maybe
Yeah.
less.
They're
It's low enough health points.
it's literally a brain with legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I took the art idea from Arcane. Is it Arcane Forge? The artist guy on YouTube. He does his
Yeah, yeah,
own
yeah.
interpretation to the monsters. His intellect devour is way better because it doesn't have little dog legs. It has like they look like kind of pointy, sharp spider legs. And then he took the brain stem that's still attached and makes it curl up like a scorpion tail at the back, which I thought was just really really cool.
Nice and creepy.
Yeah, it's a way more visceral interpretation of the monster
Visceral
than
is
a brain
exactly
with
the
little
word.
little terrier legs.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder, like, because some of the art, and like, I think it's just because probably some of the art is earlier, but like more recently, the art for like creatures that are meant to be like horrifying, I find is way more visceral and like terrifying, like than like, because even looking at the actual mind flayer, like art in the monster manual, it's a bit cartoony. Like those things should be horrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it shows you a clear image of what they look like, but there should probably be something of them kind of like opening their tentacles and showing their mouth and
I
stuff
think
like that.
there is one or two of those, but they're all like, I think it's probably just a personal preference for me. Like I think with those I'd like them a little more, like slightly less stylized, more on the real kind of realistic horror-ish kind of angle. Because they are like terrifying, horrifying creatures. They literally like puncture your skull and suck your brain out and kill you instantly. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so we should probably actually talk about what we're going to talk about for the rest of the today, seeing as we're almost 20 minutes in at this point.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's great. That was awesome. That was super awesome. We actually also had finished up a one shot. That was this week, wasn't it? Yeah, that was this week. Sorry, Elden Ring has just absorbed all time and space for me now. I am tarnished. I just live there now. But yeah, on Thursday we finished up a series of one shots we did. That was real fun. And oh my god, I've literally never so Conor was playing as a part of a party who were trying to figure out a mystery of why these sigils are being put on temples in this town and temples are being attacked and weird stuff was going on. And eventually the guys work their way through the plot. They pick up on some clues. They go investigate another noble house. He points them towards another area, and then they go and investigate the main noble house in the area, the Hackenvok, who seem to be the most likely ones behind whatever's going on with all these weird summoning sigils and like small demon attacks. They get into a room, and Conor like literally word for word says what I had written in my notes about how the plot goes. Do you want to tell the people what it was, Conor?
Yeah, so the town is kind of just it's a selection of districts that surround a central district.
Yeah.
And we had found some notes about each of the temples and the fact that they were marked and stuff like that. The marking on them was only like maybe about this big, and maybe 6 inches across, something like that. So it wasn't huge, but there was these kind of these glyphs put into it, and it took us. We did it over 3 sessions. In the first session, I remember someone cast detect magic, and we discovered that they had conjuration magic about them. And when we caught some of the people in the act, they used like blood. They cut their arm and they used blood to like summon some demons. So we're like, okay, clearly these guys are trying to summon demons at the churches. In the session when we were looking at some of the stuff, Martin, I forget how you described it. You described it some way, and it clicked in my head, and I was like, Martin, if I
said that the 5 temples were in a ring around a central point, which was the plaza.
I see you didn't say a ring. What you said, like, oh, you can see all the 5 temples in the district, and in the middle you can see the central plaza one. And I was like, oh no. And I said, Martin, if I take like a piece of charcoal or something from the table and I draw a perfect circle through all of those, does it form a circle and then like a center point? And then you were like, yep. And then I was like, and if I joined the lines between all those center points, is it a pentagram? And you're like, it is a pentagram. And I'm like, oh no.
It's literally how I had it written out. It's like each of the temples forms a ring around the central alabaster plaza, and when joined together, they make a pentagram. Like the first map I posted to you guys, to get the ring, the actual positioning of all the stuff right. I did the 5 districts, and then I put a point in each one. And if you look at the first map I sent you, there is the temple is marked on each one, and that's because on the layer under that, the pentagram is drawn connecting them all.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and then I immediately went, "Are you Full Metal alchemisting me right now?" Which is no, it was good. It was a great reveal. And like you said, it's always nice when something like that happens where you set up a bit of story, because sometimes people find out the wrong clue at the wrong time, or they come to a conclusion and they're like, oh my god, is it this? And they're like, oh, you're close, but it's actually this other thing. But like, yeah, it's very satisfying when someone in the party gets what you're trying to convey to them. But like, it's good when you just tell them something. So if you're like, oh, here's what's happening, and they're like, oh my god, that's mad. But like, if they can make that last leap, if you give them 8 out of 10 parts or 7 out of 10 parts, and they make that last leap themselves, that's really, really satisfying.
Yeah, it was really fun. But yeah, one shots are fun. People run them; they're really great, and they also give your DM an excuse to play sometimes.
Have we done an episode on one shots?
I believe we have. I think we have. I feel like it's a thing we've done, or at least talked about.
I mean, we talk about it, all things.
Yeah, I think we have. I feel like we have, or maybe that was one of the last episodes.
One of the many lost episodes of our podcast.
Many might be a bit much. It's like 3 to 4 max.
Sci-fi, cosmos, whatever that. We've done a lot of episodes.
Yeah, man.
Death. I'm not seeing one shots here.
Future topic. It must have been one of the last episodes.
Because I feel again, it might have been one we mentioned in the previous episode and say, hey, we should do this, and we just haven't gotten around to it yet.
This is awesome.
I'll do a proper look later on, but I don't think so. I don't think we have done one shots as a topic just yet.
Fruitful topic. But yeah, anyway, speaking of topics, we should probably actually talk about today's, because it's now been even longer since I mentioned we should probably actually talk about today's
23 minutes.
23 minutes 22. Now. But yeah, so today, as you've probably guessed by both the title and my snappy intro, we're going to talk about Session 0. No, it is not a sugar-free version of D&D. It is full fat, full sugar, and all the fun. Conor, what is Session 0?
Session 0 it's just that. It's the very first session. It's before even your first session. It's where you get together it can be a few different things. It's where you get together both the DM and the party. You don't do a lot of playing normally in Session 0. Normally Session 0 is to get together and roll up stats for your character, to talk about the characters you want to play. Maybe if you want to build a balanced party, you might get together and be like, I'm going to play a cleric, so we have a healer. Does someone want to play a barbarian so we can tank? And you'll kind of come up with a good party composition. The DM will kind of lay out some stuff about the upcoming campaign, maybe how long it is, what kind of themes or gameplay styles will be explored. Like, is this going to be a very combat heavy, or will it be very RP heavy? Mm-hmm. Or maybe like it'll be like intrigue and investigation, so you should play stealthy characters or something like that. So they'll lay out what to be expected from the campaign, and then what they'll do is they'll kind of go through maybe some homebrew rules, and then also maybe some some themes of the campaign. Is this going to be your standard, we're going to get a job, go kill a monster, come back? Or will there be like some real horror elements in it? Will there be some very serious subject matter explored? And the DM will kind of position to you guys, hey, so are you okay with this? I kind of want to do something that's like maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's a thing where like you're just off the top of my head, maybe it's something where it's like, there is a coliseum and you guys are in that coliseum as slaves and stuff like that, and you need to escape, and maybe someone has a problem with the idea of the slave concept or something like that, which is something you want to kind of like address before you get multiple sessions into a campaign and then go, actually, I'm not comfortable with that, and then the DM's like, I've already written a campaign about that, oops. So it's basically, okay, sorry, I'm rambling. To wrap it up in a nutshell, the Session 0 is a session where all of the players, the DM included, because the DM's a player, sit down and align what they expect from the campaign. They reach an alignment, they reach an accord on what they expect from the campaign, what they want to do, what everyone's okay with doing, and then that sets up the next few weeks, months, or possibly even years of the campaign you're about to play.
Yeah, that's the episode, folks. Thanks very much. We'll see you this time next week for another episode of the Micflayers podcast. No, that's like a really, really good, succinct kind of overview, high level overview of kind of basically everything. I
got there in the end. It wasn't quite succinct at first, but I got there at the end.
Yeah, the end was succinct, but the rest of it was just like a high level overview of pretty much everything you can cover.
Future Conor, if you could just cut the first half of that ramble and just add the last like couple lines, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, I'm not 2, 3. God, okay. Now we'll make you look real smart in the edit, kid. Don't worry.
Yeah. Oh, that takes a lot of editing.
Oh man. That's pretty much it. I have another question for you, even though I know the answer. Have you ever used the Session Zero?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I thought you hadn't.
Well, I mean,
because I know we did one-on-one sessions before we started our current campaign, which I actually really enjoyed.
Session Zero as well, because we were all at the table. We rolled our characters. What's the Session Zero? Did we do it at like? No, we weren't playing any other games at the time. So yeah, we did that, because I specifically remember us.
Sorry, I do remember us rolling our stats together, because I'm sorry, Mike, if you listen, because I remember Mike rolled the worst stats possible the first time he rolled. He had just a horrendous stats, and we had to do the house. We do the house rule where you can reroll the stats if they're truly, truly abysmal.
I use the Matt Coble thing of if you have at least 2 15s, that's a viable character. So you stick with it, but if you don't, you can just re-roll the full 6.
Yeah. I got 2 18s, but that'll do.
Yeah. But no, I've used we that's really the only one I've done. I don't do them for one shots because that's a lot to ask for someone to come by for a couple hours so you can talk about the other few hours you're going to play of a one shot game. You know, it's a lot of time commitment. So that's why I tend to be a little bit. I usually know my players before doing a one shot, so I won't explore any overly sensitive subject matter or anything like that. You know.
Yeah.
And it's also just a one-off session as well. So if we sit down and I make it a really combat-heavy session and someone was expecting a lot of RP, then look, I'm sorry you didn't get exactly what you wanted, but it's not going to be the worst thing in the world. It's not that you've committed to multiple months of a campaign. That's not what you were expecting. It's one evening. Next time we'll do something a bit more RP heavy. You know.
Yeah, exactly. You can just sort that with a follow-up one shot that's more RP heavy and into the small combat maybe. Yeah. Personally speaking, I actually haven't ever done one, and that's purely because when I started DMing for my current campaign, a Session Zero wasn't really a talked about concept. Like I mentioned it to you before we started the podcast recording. When I was doing a little bit of research, I literally just typed in Session Zero into the search bar in D&D Beyond to see what it said about it, because I basically all the books. There are only 3 entries for Session Zero total as a concept on D&D Beyond. There's one for Tasha's, which is very, very good and will form the basis of what we're going to discuss for this episode. There is one for Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which is, I feel, very necessary as well. And then there's also one for Strixhaven. For Strixhaven. And again, I think that's necessary, but for different reasons, and we'll get into the different reasons between 2 and 3 there.
You're going to be inadvertently giving the scouts salute there. Yeah.
I've never been a scout though. That's the other post of this podcast.
Yes, thank you. I like when people mention I was a scout because it makes me sound capable in a wild in a survival situation. We didn't do a whole lot of survival stuff. We just kind of we pitched tents and we hung out in the forest and we just cursed a lot. Honestly, I look back at my scouting days and I'm just like, we were like 12 and 13 and we cursed like sailors, and our leaders, our scout leaders who were with us, never corrected us. We'd say the most horrible shit, and none of them ever said, "Hey, language, cop on." You know, not once. And if any of our parents heard us, they'd be like, "Oh my god, where am I sending my son? Like, you know, what is this group he's in?"
Yeah, man. No, I can honestly say I definitely swore more between the ages of 13 and 17 than I do now as like a 28-year-old. Like,
You kind of get it all out of your system.
Yeah, it's because it's new and fresh, and and you weren't allowed to do this
Yeah.
like 2 years ago. Anyway, getting back to session 0. So yeah, I hadn't used session 0 because it wasn't really much of a talked about concept.
Yeah.
But my guys, pretty much, I remember we had one session really early on where I think it might have either just been that, or they were a few of the people I was aiming for were over at my house for drinks at the time, I think. And we just had kind of a general chat about D&D, and then I set up a group chat, and like in the group chat I kind of gave them the general idea. I was like, look, I'm gonna go, like, I didn't, like, it was, I don't even want to say like the skeleton of a session 0 in the message, because that's just giving it too much, like far too much credit. I was just basically like, hey guys, we're gonna have a lot of fun. This is generally how D&D works. This is kind of what I want to go for. We're gonna have a lot of fun. I'm gonna make you guys feel like heroes as best I can, and hopefully it'll be really awesome. We'll have some cool fights, some cool roleplay, and you'll all get to tell a cool story together. In the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, it's far more extensive, and I think it's like really good that they did actually finally set out, because obviously that would have been the first one as well, because Tasha's predates both Van Richten's and Strixhaven.
Yeah.
So it sets up some really good stuff in terms of like just general concepts to get across, and it actually is, because like it's been a while since I read this. I completely forgot. It's got a really cool, like, you can just roll your party origin. It's got a whole section on party origin here. And party formation.
Yeah.
So like what they directly say is, during session 0, your role, for a DM obviously, your role is to let the players build the characters they want and to help them come up with explanations for how their characters came together to form an adventuring party. It can be helpful to assume that the characters know each other and have some sort of history together, however brief that history may be. Here are some questions you can ask the players as they create characters to get a sense of the party's relationships. Are any of you related to each other? What keeps the characters together as a party? What does the character like the most about every other member of the adventuring party? Does the group have a patron? See chapter, and then you can look at chapter 2 group patrons for thing. I think starting with a group patron is an interesting idea. I think it'd be a much more organized and focused start, because the starts of D&D campaigns tend to be a little scattered. I'm not in a bad way, but just because everyone's kind of learning their characters and feeling out how they want to play.
Yeah, even people who come to the table with a very good idea of what character they're playing, in the same way that few plans survive contact with the players, few player characters survive contact with the dice, because you'll sit down and realize you're rolling well this way or not this way, or you're at the table and you're like, hey, I wasn't planning on this dynamic, but I'm bouncing off this other character in this kind of way. I'm definitely going to lean into that, you know. So there's an element you can't really predict going in, but that can be great stuff. Like, you can find some really interesting social back and forths and stuff out of that.
Yeah, 100%. And what I actually like is what I was referring to a second ago. They have a D6 roll table that you can just roll for to see, just for if you want to do it randomly and see what reason you guys are all together, or you can just pick it as an inspiration and kind of use it directly or build on top of it for your own thing. So from 1 to 6, it's the characters grew up in the same place and have known each other for years. That's basically how the Wheel of Time starts.
The Wheel of Time starts, yeah.
The characters have united to overcome a foe, which is cool. That they could be like the last survivors of a battle or something. The characters are brought together by a common benefactor who wishes to sponsor their adventures. There's your group patron one. And that's very like Critical Role Campaign 3 at the moment with Lord Eshtaros.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Which I'm actually really enjoying seeing that. I can't remember exactly where I saw it, but I saw a video recently with Matt Mercer where he was saying, oh yeah, the group patron rules came out from Tasha's, and I was like, this would be really awesome for like a party to get started in. 4, a funeral brings the characters together. There's a very specific movie that reminds me of, and I can't think of it, and I hate it. It's like on the tip of my brain.
You hate the movie, or you can't think of it?
I hate that I can't think of it. Like, this is going to keep me up till 5 a.m. even if Elden Ring doesn't.
And let's be honest, Elden Ring will.
It's been
minimum 5 a.m.
It's been 5, 3, and 4 so far.
That being said, I did go. I was up. Well, okay, not nearly as late, but I was up till about maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock last night with Horizon.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, we're both in deep at the moment.
Yeah, I clicked the PlayStation button now and look at my friends list, and it's like Elden Ring, Horizon, Elden Ring, Horizon, Elden Ring, Horizon. 5, a festival.
I like the funeral idea. That's really interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that, but that could be kind of cool if, like,
I think it might be. I don't know. I think it might be a Bruce Lee film. I'm thinking of maybe.
My mind immediately goes to, like, what if, like, the hedge wizard of a region dies
and his students come back.
Well, maybe like his apprentice is one of the characters.
It's Umbrella Academy. It's effing Umbrella Academy. That's what
Oh
it
my
is.
god, yeah, it is. Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah. I
But yeah,
also
like,
think it's a Bruce Lee movie called The Big Boss. I think it is. It's either Big Boss
I'm
or
not feeling any Bruce Lee movies now.
It's either Big Boss or maybe Fist of Fury. I think it's Fist of Fury actually. I used to absolutely be addicted to Bruce Lee films when I was younger. I still think they're particularly awesome. I also absolutely probably shouldn't have been watching Bruce Lee films when I was like 4 or 5, given the amount of boobs and cocaine in them.
I heard someone talking about that recently about like those movies getting made and how like you would never get away with the stuff they get away with in shooting Chinese films like in China.
Yeah.
Like there's some of Jackie Chan's early stuff. Like the reason it was a big deal that he did all his own stunts is because if he shot those in America, there's no way in hell they would let him do that. But like he would walk across these things that were like really thin, like 100 feet up, and like if he fell, it's game over. But like there's no regulation, or at least at the time there wasn't any regulations like that in China.
Is it? I think it's Rush Hour where he like slides down the lights and like all the he slides down the poles and all the Christmas lights break around him as he slides down.
Oh, that's quite possible. Yeah,
I think it's the first Rush Hour, but like he actually got electrocuted doing that.
the one good thing about that is with
electrocution, he'll hang on.
It changes your muscles. So.
Oh god. Anyway, back to that. 5, a festival brings the characters together, which is actually the hook I used for our series of one shots recently. You guys arrived in the town at the time of a festival happening.
Yeah. I think it's a pretty common one. It's a very common thing to be like, rather than just you're in a town and there's something going on.
Yeah. Because then when you're a DM, you can be like, look at how awesome this festival is, and everyone's having a really great time, and that's definitely going to continue.
Yeah. No, there's never once been a problem at a festival where everyone's out in force and there's lots of drinks and food and stuff going around. That's never once caused trouble anywhere ever for even a minute.
The Starks had a great time at the Twins.
They did.
Nobody died.
Nobody died.
Nobody died. And 6, which I've actually seen this done. I think it might be the first High Rollers D&D campaign, maybe. 6, the characters find themselves trapped together. It might not be the first one, but I remember I watched a good bit of a.
Is it Lightfall? I think it's called.
I'm honestly not sure. This is going back a few years. I just remember it because the characters were all traveling in like a wagon train going somewhere. And then all the wagons get attacked, and then they all wake up, and they're like inside this like stony kind of underground cavern. And
yes, and there's like all these like corrupted tree.
Yeah, there's all these like vines like infesting people and corrupting them and stuff.
Yeah, I think that was Lightfall.
That was really cool. That was a really.
Who's your one who is in that? Who like always works in like her Chinese heritage into her characters in a really cool way.
Is there an? Oh God, I need to look.
She played a tiefling in that one who had a spear as a weapon.
I remember
she reflavored it as a guandao.
Yes, I remember her. She was awesome.
Really cool. And then, of course, I think I mentioned this before. Her character, her Air Ganassi warlock hexblade. She reflavored she called the blade Tiang Da. Is it Tiang Dao? Or Tiang Gao? I think it's Tiang Dao. And it's named after a Chinese satellite or something like that. Kim.
Yeah.
But yeah, she named her sword after a Chinese satellite because her sword like fell from space. That's in the setting that they're in. I think she does such good work. And honestly, just pure if you even put that aside and just look at the character from an aesthetic level, I think the blue and yellow kind of jacket and the light blue Air Ganassi skin and everything, just the whole color scheme of that character looks amazing. I think she's really cool.
Yeah, I do like the little I did watch of I think of that one. I thought it was a Rose, but I guess that's the next one, and that's the one with the guy with the color drafting magic, isn't it? That's where Chris
but that character, the Air Ganassi Hexblade, is in Erois as well.
Oh, okay, sorry, yeah. Oh, they're same.
I'm pretty sure it's called Lightfall.
Campaigns. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Same group, different campaigns. I think Lightfall is the one where they were underground with the corrupted tree, and that was where Kim was playing the tiefling monk.
The like little bit of that I watched, I distinctly remember her character just because she did a really cool. Like I think it was that she was a tiefling monk, which is a cool combo anyway. and then she was like this really cool Chinese flavored with the guandao and everything.
Yeah.
And I love that weapon. That weapon is just awesome. I watched Shaman King when I was in a very impressionable age, and Basson is so cool. Like,
the intro music to Shaman King is so badass.
Man, the new one is fun. It's a lot of fun actually.
I kind of did so. On this party origin table, I kind of did 5 and 6 to you guys at the start of this campaign, because you guys showed up. Basically, I said I had you make separate characters and all that, and then I said, I ran a one-on-one session with each of you, and then you all ended up arriving in the same town just before the festival's kind of due to hit, a day or so beforehand, and then when the festival kicked off. I described that everyone started getting drunker and drunker, and a lot of people were an unusual amount of people were throwing up after drinking so much. And it turns out the ale was like poisoned, and they all died, but then came back as zombies immediately, and there was an outbreak in town.
Yes.
And I had you roll randomly on a table then to decide where you guys were at the time that the outbreak happened, and like. I can't remember. I think Mike ran into Wabu ran into the church and was barricaded in the church with the young what was he, like the acolyte, I guess.
Yeah.
Dan, I want to say, ended up in the above the blacksmith shop with her and her family. And then you rolled the really fun one, which is you remember running through the square and you hear something snap and you turn around just in time for one of the poles that is holding up the canvases in the market turns around, hits you in the face, knocks you out, but covers you. So you're in the middle of the market square, surrounded by zombies, but none of them know you're there because you're under this tarp.
The least stealthy member of the party at that as well.
Yeah, exactly. That was a fun start. That was a good start, and I think it was really exciting. Hot starts are always great. But I do feel like it took a while for you guys to get into a party dynamic, particularly because like I remember drawing out the triangle of hate. Because each of you hated, like, there was like this triangle of hatred because
I remember that diagram being sent to the group chat.
Because Wabu, who was a turtle, didn't like Lug, who was a human, because he was human, and all his experiences with humans back home was like, oh, they steal my people's land and they drive us out of our homes and stuff like that. So he's like, I don't trust you because you're human. And then you didn't trust Arkham because Arkham was a dark magic user, and you're like, oh, I don't mess with dark magic at all. And this guy is clearly into some messed up stuff because he was a warlock. And then Arkham didn't like Wabu
because Wabu was just generally a bit of an ass for the first half of the campaign.
Well, yeah, but there was something else about it. I can't remember what it was. There was some other reason he didn't like him.
I can open up the messenger on my PC now and go searching for triangle.
I'm currently scrolling back to try and find the triangle of hate.
Go search in conversation, triangle of hate. I guarantee you will find it, because that's a very unique phrase.
Yeah.
Thankfully now we've evolved into a square of friendship, and it's solid.
True, yeah, it just took you a while to get there. But,
it took a while, Wabu dying.
It took me killing Wabu. No, do you know what, actually, weirdly, wow, now that I think about it in this context, it took you guys, when you reached level 3, so you started on level 1, when you reached level 3, you were in the Underdark sailing on a boat, and that's when all 3 of you got your subclasses, and also when all 3 of you decided that you're going to share like what happened to you and how you ended up here. And that was kind of the moment that you're like, cool, we're not just working together, we know each other now. And then in the same session, or in the immediate next session, I ended up killing Wabu.
At the most, it was the next session.
I ended up killing him almost immediately. And then he was like, oh, cool.
Just as he gets his subclass based around being so angry you can't die.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, funny.
The dice have a will of their own, and they love irony.
Yeah, rest in peace, turtle person.
Indeed. But he is now revived as snapping turtle person.
He is. But yeah, I think that's good. I think the dynamic got there in the end. But I think maybe the next campaign I might just do something like this where I start you off with a reason. I won't just drop you in and have you, because it's okay sometimes to drop the players in and be like, you'll figure out a way, or there's a fight that will happen and you guys will all jump in and you'll be like, hey, we did pretty well in that fight together. It will work itself out.
Yeah.
Because the players typically are going to play together.
Yeah.
But I think there's something to be said for definite for deciding in session 0, hey, so you guys are an adventuring party for a while, or maybe you're all part of the same guild, or maybe you were hired by the same person to do this job, you know?
Yeah, I did something similar because I basically half my party left and I got 2 new members in. So to introduce those 2 people, what I had happen was that the old members of the party, the members of the old party who didn't leave, were waiting in a line to get into a city because there had been serious checks put in because the town had begun being assaulted every now and then by lycanthropes. So while they're in the big long security queue, lycanthropes attacked the big long queue of people. So it basically broke into 3 split fights where there was the 2 party members who knew each other. Then there was my current Bloodhunter Thurston here, and then further back in the line was Mandroy, my Wildfire Druid. And then through the course of the fight, they basically went together. And now they're fighting on behalf of gods.
Pretty metal. But I think a fight's a great way to do it. But again, session 0 can be great for setting up the it's where expectation comes in.
Yes.
Keyword of today, folks, is expectation, and that's everything. That session 0 is, and it might be that the DM wants you guys to have a certain mentality about it, like that you are a party, or it might be that the DM wants you to build a character that is like, here, build a character, can be any class and race you want, but they should be a character that would feasibly join X guild, you know?
Yes, yeah. I think that's a good way to do it as well. I think like session 0 as well, you can avoid a lot of like really common pitfalls that happen with particularly if it's new players or new groups coming to play D&D. Stuff like character overlap or like class overlap or what's another? I had a third point there and it's entirely vanished from my brain. It was a character overlap, class overlap, and setting expectations so that people don't get the wrong idea. For like how Mike thought we were running an evil campaign for like as we mentioned many times for like at least
I said morally ambiguous.
Yeah, that's too many words for Mike. You should have just said like grey.
I should have said there's good, there's bad, and there's grey. These guys are grey.
Yeah. That's not your fault either. Like, oh god, I love that.
You know, in a certain sense, it is, because he's been in my campaign so long at this point. I should know how to approach him.
I love when I write a long title for something because I know Mike's gonna have to try and say it.
Oh yeah, like one of my favorite. Like I'm there writing D&D notes and writing character names and stuff like that. And there's now like normally it's like, okay, what culture are they from in the game? Okay, what kind of sound do I want to go for based on what culture they're part of? And now there's a third part of that where I'd also consider, and what could Mike potentially mispronounce this as? And like if I come up with a name and it sounds just a little bit too much like Mike might actually say dickhead or something like that, then I'll be like, cool, his name's not going to be Icad. Because if Mike will just accidentally turn that into dickhead.
Yes, he will, or intentionally.
Or intentionally. That happened in the first campaign. It
did. It happened a lot. Anyway, what I was saying in terms of like character and class overlap, I distinctly remember when the first, I think I may have run like a semi-session 0 for my guys now that I think, but actually where I think like their first session as a party together, I think a lot of them were confused by character creation, so I think I had to sit down because I had 4 span new players to D&D.
Yeah.
So I think what we did.
You gotta have a ringer.
Yeah, I know. I did that this time around. I think what we did. I think what we actually did was I sat down with them and helped them make their characters, and then I went, okay, well, what does everyone want to play? And 2 of the people went, I want to play a druid. And then they looked at each other awkwardly, and then one of them went, okay, I'll play a sorcerer then.
Yeah, it's...
And now the sorcerer is... I won't swear, but she's really feckin' awesome, and I love her character now.
All you want.
Yeah, we can actually. I love her character now, and we're doing some really, really cool stuff with her now. She's discovering more and more of her draconic lineage. I reflavored it now, so like she casts Blade Ward a lot if she's running it. Like if she's going into somewhere she thinks it's sketch, she'll cast Blade Ward on herself.
She uses who uses Blade Ward?
I know, right? But like
I've never heard of someone in all my time playing 5th edition that casts Blade Ward.
I know, it's great. I love it. But like so like if she's somewhere weird, or if I'm starting to crank up the tension and she feels like a fight might be coming, or like maybe if I walk around the next corner I'm gonna get hit, she'll go. I'm just gonna really quickly, because it's cantrip. I'm gonna really quickly cast Blade. Yeah. I'm gonna cast Blade Ward on myself, and she's always I've always described it as like it's almost like a metallic sheen takes over her, when she casts it, and like her skin hardens. And
that's kind of cool, yeah.
Ever since we've been diving more into her backstory and doing more draconic stuff, I do it now where when I said the first time she cast Blade Ward after that, basically dragon scales rose up on her skin for a second and then faded back in. And the people have been a big fan of that.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, look, it also happened in our campaign as well, because both you and Mike wanted to play barbarians, and now you're at a point where you're both diverse enough and you both have your own sets of specific abilities. But it's particularly if you're starting a campaign at like level 1 to 3,
there's going to be a lot of overlap.
Yeah, I mean, like, just like, let's take it. Like, I had 2 fighters in the party I ran there the other day.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, here's the thing: I had 2 fighters. They weren't even the ones actually that were similar. I had a ranger and then a psi warrior, but who was using a bow as well.
Okay,
so I had 2
that's
bow
really
users.
cool though. I really like that concept. Like,
Yeah. And it was really it worked okay. There was a bit of overlap between them and stuff like that, and the fighters obviously have some similar abilities. They were level 5 though, so
yeah.
You get some stuff like the further into a class you level and then choosing separate subclasses, you're going to get unique enough abilities after a while. The problem is like levels 1 to 3, at 3rd level, you might get one ability that's different from the other person. And then other than that, they're going to be very similar. So for the first couple levels, you and Mike both playing barbarians were doing essentially the same thing. Mike was a 2-weapon wielder, so he was doing more damage output, and that can kind of be a thing, because I know at the time you were kind of like feeling like you were a bit underpowered.
Yeah,
but totally. It was just how they were built and stuff.
You're spot on. Yeah, I was feeling like I was a bit underpowered, but it was just purely because like I'm using a spear and shields, whereas Mike gets an extra attack every round, so that just totals up and up and up and up over time. Yeah.
But I mean, like that's the kind of thing now where going to our next campaign, I'm definitely going to sit everyone down and be like, cool, what's everyone playing? Let's try not to have the same, thing going on the whole time, where like multiple people want to play. Now, again, when it comes to subclasses, you level out of that problem.
Oh yeah, totally. Like it's going to be a problem for like 3 levels at the most.
Yeah, exactly. But I think like 3 levels can last a few weeks depending on how long of a game you're running and stuff like that. So ideally, you want to set things up right away. One, just simply for party diversity, so that you're covering all your bases, so that you have someone who's sneaky, you have someone who's tanky, you have someone who has magic, you have someone who's healing. So you're going to want to do that for a composition reasons, but also because you don't want, like, if you have 2 rogues in the party and one of them has 16 dex and then obviously proficiency, like double proficiency and stuff like that, but then the other one has 18 dex and double proficiency. One of the main thing rogues do a lot is sneak around, and if one of them is like very obviously better, or has some ability that makes them a much better sneaker, and then it kind of undermines the other rogues' abilities, it's going to be like, oh, the main thing I'm good at, there's actually someone here who's already better at it than me. It can kind of make it seem like your character isn't maybe fulfilling the ideal you had for them. So I would advise in a session 0, if a couple people want to play the same class, you can always just outline to them, okay, you both want to be fighters? Okay, what do you want to do in a while? Oh, well, I want magic, so I'm going to be an Eldritch Knight. And the other person goes, oh, perfect, I was going to go Battle Master, so I just try to be straight up, martial stuff. Yeah. That's fine. Lay out to the players, hey, look, you're going to be pretty similar for like the first, maybe 6 sessions or whatever, 5 sessions, I don't know. Yeah. Because you're both fighters doing very similar things. But you'll get your own abilities after a while and you'll kind of diversify out. Totally. And as long as there's again, setting expectations, it has to be an understanding. But when there is, I think that's fine. But avoid people playing the same class if possible. Fighters isn't too bad because all the fighter subclasses, for the most part, go in very different directions.
They do. And you can very much differentiate like your fighter by the weapon you choose. Like if you have 2 fighters and one picks a great axe and one picks a bow, they're not going to be anywhere near the same.
They're going to be completely different. But again, if you have like,
whereas for example, like barbarians, you don't really do ranged barbarians, so it just comes down to what melee weapon you pick, and if then stuff like that can happen. Or I went spear and shield because I wanted to be tankier, and Robbie went full on damage, so that damage discrepancy happened.
exactly. But yeah, and it's so that the clerics are another one. Clerics aren't terribly different between their subclasses.
And as well, what helps with stuff like clerics and other spellcasters, often they get their subclass before level 3. They'll get it like some will get level 1, some will get a level 2.
True. And as well as that, they may have very different ideas about what kind of spells they want. We kind of saw that actually in Critical Role Campaign 2
Yes,
with
totally.
Laura playing Jester as a trickster cleric, and then Caduceus played by Taliesin playing a grave cleric.
Oh, Grave, he was grave, yeah, because he could cancel crits. That ability is so ridiculous.
But he focused on a lot of buff abilities, buffing and debuffing abilities, as well as healing. Jester, despite playing a cleric, famously rarely healed anyone.
I'm the cleric.
She'd take like one healing spell a day, and everything else is like damage. And to be fair, clerics can do a lot of damage, but little advice to the community out there. Not our community, just the general D&D community. If it was our community, I'd be talking to 3 people. But if you're gonna play a cleric, you get a lot of spells. Mix them up. Don't pick all damage. Don't pick all healing. You know, even if you're playing like a life cleric, don't feel like you need to pick all healing stuff. Take a couple damage things as well. You know.
Yeah. Laura Bailey plays clerics like I would play clerics.
Yeah. Well, Martin built a cleric, a character he told me about, which
death cleric.
It's basically it's a death cleric, but it's basically a cleric paladin because he made the death cleric and then he made it out with a fallen Aasimar.
Yes, sir.
And he's basically able like a couple of times per short rest or something.
He's got necrotic smites.
Like a really heavy necrotic smite, which is insane.
And he uses a glaive.
And he uses a glaive like the Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, I think definitely session 0 can be a great time to work on good party composition, making sure that you're covering all your bases. Do we have a healer? Do we have a tank? Do we have someone sneaky? You know, do we have someone who has more general magics like a wizard or a sorcerer or something as well?
Yeah, and as well, I think like not even just the class stuff, like character concept. You like if 3 people show up on the first day and they're like, "I'm the lost son of an ancient line looking to reclaim my home," you're like, crap, I gotta add 3 lost kingdoms to my map.
I'm also the lost son of an ancient line.
or like someone comes along and is like, I want to play a monk and I'm a special monk because I use the 4 elements, but only I can use the 4 elements, and 2 people say that.
Yeah, exactly. If someone's like, oh, I want to be like the Avatar, so I want to be like an elemental monk, and then someone else is like, ooh, I also wanted to play elemental monk. This is awkward because it's only meant to be 1 avatar.
Or like someone's like, I want to be like a rogue, but like Batman, and then someone else is like, I want to be a rogue, but like Moon Knight, and you're like,
you're basically one of you's wearing black, one of you's wearing white, and that's it. That's the only difference.
What one of you people think is crazy, and one of you is clinically crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, and one of you is superpower. One of you superpowers is money, and the other one is insane and powered by an Egyptian moon god.
Yeah, exactly.
Moon Knight coming out soon.
I'm just looking forward to that.
I'm so looking forward to that.
But yeah, there's some really definitely setting up, and also like you might also play like a character as well. And this is something that I didn't foresee with our current campaign.
Remember campaign 1? We had 3 nobles.
We did.
Yeah, because there was me.
Who was 3?
Oh, sorry, I think it was 2. No, it was 2 because me and Drunan went to the prince's thing to get an audience for the refugees.
Yes.
But yeah, there was like 2, and thankfully there were very different noble stories, like in terms of background and stuff. So it didn't really come up, but like hilariously, to be 2 be like, oh, I too am from I guess a still existent but like kind of fallen from grace family.
It's a weird thing because a lot of people might be tempted. I know a lot of people are tempted when they make a character. They don't necessarily want to tell the other people what they're playing. They want to kind of surprise them on the day, and I get that. But if you're more upfront, because you don't have to tell them everything about your backstory, but if you're more upfront about at least the race class combo that you're playing, then you can avoid some overlap and you can make sure their party composition is good. And yeah, I mean, I think having a good party because here's the thing, the moment at the start of session 1 where you go, I'm sitting in the corner, I'm a purple skinned tiefling with a revolver on my hip and stuff, like, great, you're a gunslinger tiefling. That moment lasts a moment. Whereas if you were to make sure your party composition is really solid and everyone's playing something a little bit different, then for the entire campaign, you know you have a solid, well-rounded party.
Absolutely. And like that's not to say you can't like do like themed parties either. Like just go into that very much with the expectation, and I would say even like, because I remember they did like a Jack's Machina live stream before where everyone played some class of like melee fighter, and it was mostly I think it was 5 of them or 4 of them, and it was either 3 barbarians and 1 paladin or 4 barbarians and 1 paladin. It was Joe Manganiello.
He's a paladin barb hybrid.
Yes,
he was
sorry,
a multi-class.
It was Joe
Travis
Manganiello,
was a
Big Show, Travis, and then Joe Manganiello's like personal trainer, I want to say. Yeah, there was 4.
Yeah, it was 4. Yeah.
Well, if you can
and that's fine, but again, that's like I think they kind of knew going into that they're going to play an all fighting campaign where they just rush the bad. They're a vanguard. They're going to rush the bad guys.
And that was for a one shot as well. But what I mean is that like if you want to do something like, oh yeah, we're all fighters in an army, and this is like we're going to do like a military campaign. Like I think there's steps you can take to avoid that feeling kind of crappy for people at the start. One of those could be starting people at level 3.
Sorry, I missed a beat there. How, if starting a campaign like that, how would that have a negative effect?
No, I'm saying to avoid it.
Sorry, what is the cause of the negative effect?
5 fighters in a party.
Right. No, sorry. Yeah. No, I got you. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, I missed a beat there, and I was kind of like.
Yeah, I was saying like if you're doing a theme party where everyone is X class or X kind of character. Like I think if it's going to be more than just a one shot, if it's going to be like maybe like a 5 level campaign or like a whole campaign, I think starting that at level 3 where everyone has their gimmick and like this is what I do better than everyone else. This is what only I can do.
Yeah, because even then, if you come out with 5 fighters, at least you can pick 5 different subclasses which are going to differentiate.
Battle Master, Psy Knight, Rune Knight, Eldritch Knight, lots of knights, Purple Dragon Knight. Except no, because it's terrible.
Yeah, it's not. You can, but you get enough
Gunslinger
slots. Gunslinger, there you go.
Gunslinger.
Bullet Knight. You can you get enough feat slots with fighters, like you get the extra one with them, that you can actually just build all the features of playing a Purple Dragon Knight with feats in terms of the blocking and all that kind of stuff. They're not great. It's basically a plain fighter class with like 3 feats is all the Purple Dragon Knight is. Something else I was going to say there about party composition. So party composition obviously super important. I think, like I said, expectation about the campaign as well, very important. I think I've definitely noticed it with people I've played or ran D&D for. People, and I've done it myself as well, but when you come up with a character concept, and we all do this the whole time, when you're playing a character already, we tend to write other characters because we go, I got this idea and I wrote it down and I'll play it in the campaign some point later. We tend to get entrenched in those ideas when we're kind of sitting on it for a long time and not actually playing the character. And we can get a very specific, very narrow view of what kind of character we want to play. As a player, you need to be open to the idea that the DM is running a particular type of campaign. And again, this works both ways. The DM should be open to character ideas as well and try to make them work within the world. But if you're like, I went to a magic school and I've been there for like years and now I'm breaking out on my own. I had this really cool like Harry Potter or like idea for the character I want to play, and then the DM's like, I'm running like a low magic world. There isn't any like schools that teach magic. There's only like individual wizards and stuff like that. I think it's important for the DM to be like, look, I'm actually okay with you playing the wizard. We can work in as to why you're quite special because, there isn't a lot of wizards around. And the player should be open to the idea of, okay, maybe I wasn't at a school. I was just an apprentice to one particular other wizard. You should be able to meet each other halfway and that kind of stuff. And that's why Session 0 can be good, as long as you're not bringing these really entrenched expectations to the table at Session 0. Come with a vague idea of what you want to do on both sides, and then the whole point is like hashing it out and making a campaign and a party that works for everyone, not just the player, not just the DM.
But compromise is super important. It's super
important. Compromise is key.
Yeah, because it's the only way. Like, everyone will get the best out of everything if you're all willing to compromise a little bit, just a little bit on the concept you have and what you want, and the concept you have and what you want to do. Obviously not in like a negative way, but like, just like be willing to be flexible.
I had a whole thing where I played in a short campaign that Gavin was running for a while, and I had this idea of I kind of wanted to play he started off his idea as like a Quoth style character, but then very quickly just straight into an orc Eldritch Knight, who had like I think had a 7 charisma, so definitely not Quoth.
No. Maybe Quoth.
But maybe old Quoth, Coat.
Yeah.
But I kind of wanted to play out something there, and I had this idea of certain beats I wanted to hit. And then Gavin told me of his world where magic users are mostly illegal, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be kind of difficult to pull off. But then I rejigged the backstory and I kind of worked it in with what he told me of the setting. And then I sent him a draft, and then he kind of said, that's really cool. Just so you know, this group of people, they actually don't work like this, they work like this. And I'm like, oh, that's fine. Yeah, I can rework it and just say this thing instead. And we kind of make it work in that way. And then honestly, I feel like it makes more sense. It also kind of avoids those players coming in and kind of being like, it stops DMs from being like, we're running a hardcore survival campaign, blah blah, and if no one wants to play that, then you shouldn't. But it also stops players from coming in and being like, oh, my guy's like a gnome and he's a bard and he wants to sleep with everyone and his name is Flippity Floop. And then you're like, okay, I'm gonna need you to try just a little bit harder at making this character work
Use
in the world.
At least half of your ass.
Yeah, exactly. And like, yeah, like, look, you don't have to like come up with a really complicated name.
Yeah.
Here's some gnome names from the back of Xanathars.
Literally,
at least try
Sam Regal.
yeah, because basically, but like that's kind of the minimal I would expect if you come into a game. Like, okay, I know it's only a one shot, so it didn't really matter a whole lot, but we were playing your one shot, and Neo's Furball Druid character was named Arswank.
Yes, I had to continually
for one shot, I would not bat an eye at that.
Yeah.
My one of the lads the other night named his character Cactus, which was our nickname for him when we were teenagers because he was a prick.
I was just about to say, was he a bit of a prick?
But he actually named his dwarf fighter Cactus.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do you know what? I'm actually okay with the name Cactus. Even I'd be okay with that in a long-term campaign because it's like it could be like a nickname, you know.
Yeah.
And we could have him have a real name, but it's a hidden name, and he can do loads of that. Yeah. But
if not works, Cactus can work.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think going in with a loose idea of a character and DMs going in with a loose idea of the campaign, and both sides being open to tweaking things so that everything lines up nicely, is a really good thing to do. And I think you're more likely to get a campaign that everyone's on board with then.
Yeah. I'll let you in on a secret, folks. There was not a sea elf civilization in my world before my player played a sea elf.
There you go. I mean, yeah, but I mean, like, I probably wouldn't have put in the Celtic Kale culture into my world before. You're like, hey, I want to play like a Celtic warrior, and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of going for like an 1800s western-y kind of thing, but I can make that work. And
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It adds a really interesting kind of level of diversity and stuff like that that I didn't previously have. But yeah, I think that's Matt Coble does a really cool thing actually as well, which is a little bit different when it comes to, you need to be very open as a DM. But in his session 0, he talks about literally writing down 3 separate types of campaign that he would be interested in running. Because I have an idea for these 3 campaigns. Here you go. I think he either did it in session 0 or he sent it out to them as a doc, and he gave them like ratings as well on like combat, social, exploration or something like that.
Yeah.
And he gave them like a 1 to 5 rating on how heavy each of these campaigns would be on those factors. And then he let people vote and pick on it, you know. And it's like, can we come to a consensus? Like, if everyone picks 2, then we're probably going to have one that at least the majority of people like, or something like that, you know. And yeah, I think it's a really good idea as well. You need to be, I don't know if that would work for me, because I get moods when it comes to my creativity, and I don't know that I can, like, if I say, oh, I could run this gothic horror one, this I don't know, this underwater one, or this venture into hell one, if I'm not in the mood for like an underwater campaign, or I don't have any, if the sparks aren't flying for that one, it might be very difficult for me to run a good underwater campaign. I would much rather be like, look, here's what I want to run. How do you guys feel about that? You know, and I could keep the same themes maybe, but like tweak the social, combat, exploration levels back and forth until we get something, a pattern that works for everyone, you know.
Yeah, you just reminded me there. I was like, I had lost the thread of it earlier in the podcast. You reminded me when you said about Matt Covell doing that. Jim Davis had a really good Jim Davis, of course, of WebDM. Had a really good one.
The Jim Davis of WebDM.
The Jim Davis. Actually, it's hilarious side tangent. I was watching a Ginny Die video, and she talked about Matt Mercer and Matt Covell, and she goes, the DMs, the dungeon mats.
The dungeon man. Oh, I think I actually saw that same episode.
And that just killed me. But anyway, the thing I was saying about Jim Davis, who is also another great resource for D&D questions.
So good.
He was saying for session 0, what he does is he like sends, it's kind of similar. He sends out like a Google form that they can fill in, and it's like, what kind of fantasy is your favorite kind of fantasy? What kind of adventure do you like? Do you like what are your top 3 favorite movies? What are your top 3 favorite books?
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
And then from that he can go like, okay, so I think one of the ones might have been like, what kind of character do you want to play? What kind of world would you like to play in this character with? And then he gets all that feedback back, and then based on what he sees in there, and like he not only now knows exactly what kind of campaign these people like, but also what kind of media they really like, which is most likely going to great feedback into what you develop with their character later.
I feel like a lot of the television and movies I watch really feeds into the type of story and the type of campaign I run.
I feel like it's very blatantly obvious to all my characters.
A similar setup to that you could do as well, and it's one I'm a fan of, is the draw a map, slide it in front of them, and go, right, here's what you're playing. And then like the players, and if you have enough kind of stuff worked out in the world and stuff, interesting little locations, someone might be like, oh, is that like an elven city in the forest? Can I be an elf from there, And then it's like, yeah, absolutely. And there's a coastal town over here. I was thinking of playing a sailor. Could I be like a dwarf from that coastal town? Absolutely. And then you're giving people really solid anchors in the world. And then you could be like, okay, you could either let them infer it from the map themselves, or you could be like, so here are 5 things going on in this kingdom at the moment. Over here, this town is being plagued by like some sort of undead in the forest. This one over here, there's been werewolf sightings, and recently someone was killed as a result. In this city down here, someone made an assassination attempt on the king's life, and they're trying to search for the assassin. And then people can decide amongst themselves. We're all from these places. We're gonna kind of, as a group, go to this other place. And then like, which one of these sounds the most interesting to you? Like assassination, werewolves, undead, how there's a dragon in this mountain sitting on a pile of gold and his name is Smoog.
Yes.
But I think that's a really cool way as well. If you're like me and you're someone who likes drawing maps, that could be a really cool way. And I think like seeing where you are in the world as well, for me anyway, I find when I can see where things are on a map, right? I do this when I go on holidays as well. If I'm like, I'm going to this country, I will go to it on Google Maps, I will zoom in, and I will look at like where the town or the city I'm going to is. And like, if I follow the coast, where does that bring me? Oh, cool, another town. Okay, and if I go back in, and where are the borders and what countries is it next to? I like to know my bearing in the world and where I am and what's around me. So I think it's nice if you show people a map and you go, here's the country you're in. You can start in any of these towns, and there's all this stuff going on, and you can be from anywhere in this, and if you could put like a little arrow at the bottom of the map and go, oh, to the south here it's like the Elven Kingdom, or the north one is like, oh, the dwarves live in these mountains here, and like again, you can kind of like let people, because I feel like that gives them real anchor points in the world, and I feel that makes the world more theirs. While still being equal parts, the DM still has equal control over that, but it makes them feel like they're not just characters that are dropped in session 1. They're actually like living in the world and part of the world.
Yeah, it gives them a stake in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, like, because that could be really great if like you're like, I'm going to be from this little farming town here, and it's like, cool. If anything ever happened to that town, or if it came under attack, your character would feasibly want to go there as soon as possible and help the town. So like, that could be some really cool stuff to or like, your family is there, so you want to protect your family and everything. So like, it can make some really interesting plot points,
Totally. And like, that's something that shows up in media and books all the time as well. And yeah, I think anytime you can motivate a player just purely through things that their character, like if a player is motivated by something that just their character would care about, that isn't necessarily like a new item or gold or a level, or it's a story element. I think that's when you know you really have like properly someone has the story has their hooks in them, like, and they're just gonna they're yours, they're ready to go for you to take them all the way to the end, like.
Yeah, you can't always write that kind of dynamic, because that's the great thing about like a dynamic living world that the DM has thought out really well, is that rather than just if you drop the players in, they then have this like connection where I wasn't planning on them doing this thing, but they've elected of their own accord because that's their hometown, and they decided that they're a lawful good fighter and that their hometown means a lot to them, the people they grew up mean a lot to them. So they immediately want to go there and defend the town from the orc attack. And you go, great, that's suddenly a quest now, let's do that. And you can arrive and chase them off and pursue them into the woods and find their fortress and kill the orc chieftain. And then great, the town is saved, and not only are you someone who's well known in town now, but you're now also the hero of your hometown, which is, and it could, again, you can write this stuff if you want, but I think when it kind of organically comes about in that way, because a player has decided that this is how his character feels, brilliant.
Yeah, that's, and as a DM, it's always super rewarding to see like that level of investment as well, from like players too.
Oh yeah. When a player makes a choice, not because it's kind of what the DM is presenting to them, but it's because what they feel as a character, you're on a really good track there.
Absolutely. I think probably like the last thing we're probably going to talk about here, I'd imagine, just based on the time, but it's probably the most important thing I think in the session 0 is it's a big element. It's called the social contract of D&D. And we kind of talked that we actually gave some examples of people maybe slightly going against the social contract of D&D earlier in the show, when you were talking about your one shot. Conor, what is the social contract in D&D, if you wouldn't mind educating some of the viewers?
It's basically like an agreement in session 1. Again, you're aligning with everyone. I'm using all my tech support jargon here. You need to reach an agreement. You need to align with the person you're speaking with.
We're circling back to that point now.
Yeah, circling back. We'll put a pin in that.
And moving forward, we'll continue to discuss it.
Moving forward, yeah, exactly. God, you know the two of us work in call centers.
I work in the video game industry. Excuse me.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Actually. So the social contract is basically, as well as deciding on your party composition, what type of campaign you're going to run, where your character is going to be from, or how your character fits into the world. The DM and the players are going to collectively decide amongst themselves what is okay with everyone in the party in terms of themes that are explored, maybe certain types of sensitive content, like maybe certain violence. Maybe you're okay with saying, I go up and I hit them with my sword. And you do 10 damage, great, but maybe you're not okay with saying, oh, you go up and you stick their blade into their gut and you slice it across it, and there's all this really graphic, kind of stuff that goes along with it. Maybe some people are kind of queasy to stuff like that, they don't really like it. Maybe some stuff that like people have, I don't know, recently lost someone, you don't want to lean too heavy on the theme of death, that's the case. Someone might be like of an ethnicity or I don't know, how would you describe it? Like
someone might be from like a group of people or peoples that have been like oppressed in the past, or have have some kind of terrible, maybe like something like genocide or something like that related.
You might have grown up being treated very poorly for who you are, for something about your person, and then you don't want a campaign then where it's like, oh, here are the humans and they're really, really racist to the elves, because that might just touch a little bit too close to home.
Try not to reflect any trauma from your players' lives in the game.
Agreed.
Is what I'd say. Like directly, and like any particularly bad, and that's where like the session 0 and the social contract and all that is really, really important, right? And I can give you a really good example of that, I think, and it kind of comes with setting the expectations as well. Kind of comes in it, right? So, I love Marvel movies. I've seen pretty much all of them multiple times, bar like one or two. However, when Guardians of the Galaxy came out, I did not see it in the cinema. I just never got around to it. I just saw the trailers, looked awesome. I was like, I'll get around to it eventually. And I think like maybe 2 years after it came out, I remember I watched it at a friend's house at a house party. Well, it was like it's just a bunch of us around, not a house party, just a bunch of us around to watch movies and have a few drinks. And I remember that I was sitting down and I was like, Guardians of the Galaxy, all the trailers show me this is going to be hilarious. There's like a tree man that talks. There's a raccoon that's stealing people's limbs. Like there's all this like wacky stuff going on. And then the first 5 minutes of that film opens with him, like, a very, very, like, visceral scene of his mom dying to cancer, like, in front of him. And, like, without getting too personal, I have, like, lost family members to cancer, and I was not expecting that. And when that just went, first 5 minutes, I, like, had to walk out of the room for a few minutes and just kind of take a breath and go back. And now when I watch Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm totally fine. That's grand. Doesn't really faze me. But it's the fact
catches you off guard if you don't see it coming.
It's the fact that I did not know it was there, and it was so, like, close to what I had experienced in real life that normally that, even though that wouldn't bother me, if it just, like, slipped through the armor and got me, and I had to be like, I need to take a phone call or something, because I'll be right back. And then, like, I came back in and was fine for the rest of the movie. And that's what you want to avoid in your D&D campaign.
Yeah.
That's literally what that's like. You do not want to reflect something like that back on them and have someone have to process that or deal with that, because even if they're able to kind of just push past it at the time, you're probably going to think about it later when they're at home, and that's not what you want. And as well, like, there are certain things that just won't happen in my games. Like, no one's going to get, like, sexually assaulted in a game I run. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah,
it's just not going to happen.
That's a big red no. It will never happen at my table. If a player tries to have it happen at my table, you will stand up and you will walk out of my house immediately. You're no longer welcome at this table. Please leave. And, like, I would not be comfortable with it. I don't think anyone else would be comfortable with it. It doesn't make your game gritty or real or dark. Zack Snyder. All right.
Careful now. He's a god, and we're just jealous.
I'm going to pretend you didn't just say that.
It's an inside joke.
But yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, no, there's certain things, there's certain stuff that's just not going to happen. With D&D, obviously there's a certain level of, like, killing and violence and stuff, but again, the level and how you describe it or how you portray it can be different.
And, like, you can also kind of infer certain levels of comfort from, like, the media people consume, right? So, like, everyone I DM for was a huge fan of Game of Thrones, loved it until it went to shit. But, like, so I know that there's a certain level of...
And now it's time for Martin's rant.
No, I'm good. I got that out years ago. So I know there's a certain level of violence and adult themes and, like, things that are happening that they can deal with, that they're comfortable with. And so, like, I know that, like, if I'm... For example, if my blood hunter beheads someone, I can go, like, the sword, like, hisses through the air, impacts with his neck, you can hear it as it slices through the flesh and the muscle and the blood sprays out. I can go into that level of detail with them, and no one's going to be offended or feel uncomfortable, anything like that, because I know what level what's an acceptable level for them. And I think that's probably the most important thing you can find out in a session 0. What is an acceptable level? So, and, like, I don't like snakes. We often just throw snakes into our campaigns for the crack. It's not it's not at a level where I'm ever uncomfortable. I'm just like, I fucking hate snakes.
Yeah, here's the thing. Yeah, because and I think you mentioned something about this. About is it the hard and soft social contracts?
Yes, that's as part of the way they actually lay it out on in Tasha's. So it's a social contract, and they describe it as hard and soft limits. I think just to give you the exact text of what they're described there.
I have it here if you want.
Please, if you want.
A soft limit is a threshold that one should think twice about crossing, as it's likely to create genuine anxiety, fear, and discomfort. A hard limit is a threshold that should never be crossed.
Yeah, so, like, I wouldn't even necessarily, snakes are exactly a soft limit for me.
They're more even less than that.
Yeah, it's less than that. It's more like if you throw it in, I'm just like, Conor.
Yeah, and I like cards on the table. I do throw snakes every now and again, and I do it kind of. Here's the thing, it's kind of like me and spiders, right? I don't like spiders. I hate them. They're gross. It's not, if they're standing still, hey, that's a really cool looking creature with multiple legs. What's that all about? If they're moving, it's the face hugger from Alien, and I saw that movie way too young, and it makes me uncomfortable. But not in a way that I'm like, I'd get up and walk away from a table, just in a way that where I kind of maybe shudder and go, and make a bit of reaction. But that is sometimes okay. Again, you want to know the people you're playing with and where this falls. But if it's even less than a soft limit, like Martin said there with him and snakes, it creeps them out. But that can be good when you're trying to invoke emotion. When you want to invoke a little bit of horror or a little bit of creepiness, whatever, in your D&D campaign, that can be fine. Just be aware that can kind of approach the soft limit, and then, you know, it can maybe dip into that a little bit, in which case, like it says here, you should think twice about crossing. It's not something that you definitely wouldn't do it regularly, you know? It's like, okay, maybe in this one case we make this thing happen, but again, everyone needs to be comfortable with it. A soft limit, something that we can maybe dip into a little bit. We'll put our toe in the water, but we're not going to go in head first, you know?
Yes. And I think this can come up a lot as well, because there are certain spells where they say like you conjure your character's greatest fears. And if you ask someone what's your character's greatest fears, they might actually just default to something that they themselves are generally afraid of.
Yeah.
And like again, that's where the knowing where to stop comes in really important, and knowing your players really well. Like me and you have known each other for 10 plus years. Like we know each other very very well. So like we know where the line is. Now I didn't know that you really don't like the facehugger thing, so I will never put that into a one shot I'm running through.
Oh no, it's again that is one of those things that for me qualifies as but like less than
like snakes.
The soft. Yeah.
Okay.
So
cool.
it's yeah, no, so like, because you ran a one shot before where there was like a spider queen.
That was unintentional. That was the Dark Souls one shot.
Oh, no, but that didn't
like.
bother me at all. Like you were describing them, and I was thinking to myself at the time, Conor would absolutely hate. He would be like this. He'd be like compressing into a little ball for fear that he'd brush against one of the walls and one of them would touch him. But like the character at the time, because I'm playing the character at the time, I was fine with it. Again, it's imaginary, but and I think. Yeah, so I think there's maybe probably 3 limits really that you can go on. There's stuff people don't like, but they're okay with you putting in. Like, I think rats are creepy or whatever, but you might put some rats in the campaign, swarm of rats in the campaign.
Like a faux limit or something like that.
As in FAUX.
FEAUX, yeah. Oh no, FAUX. So yeah. You were right the first time. Sorry, I heard it wrong.
Yeah, maybe where it's like you're kind of nudging at something, but you're not necessarily crossing a line. Like I said, the soft limit might be a little bit heavier than that, where it's like it can, if you want to dip into like the idea of something. But again, these are limits your players set themselves for them as an individual. And if one person says, "Hey, I don't like this," just because 3 other people at the table say they do like that, does not mean you put it in. Yes. You don't make that one person feel uncomfortable for the sake of 3 other people.
And I think it's probably a good time to mention that there are built-in safety tools for RPG and D&D in particular. I know some people use stuff like the X card, where there's a card on the table, and if at any point during the session something comes up and any of the players feel very uncomfortable with it, they can raise the X card and quickly move on to a different thing. I think there's another one as well, like crap, I really should have looked more. There are specific safety tools you can use for D&D. The X card is the one I'm the most familiar with. I think there's another one with like a red button or like something like that. What I would say is just be super upfront with your as a player with your DM if there's anything you just straight up don't want to ever get into with a character.
Yeah.
And vice versa as a DM with your players, be very sure about what you do want to include, and if anyone has a problem with that, be very very willing to compromise on that or remove it entirely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Again, it's not a voting situation of do we vote this thing out. It's a veto situation. If one person says it's not okay, then it's not okay.
I think that's probably the best way to do it would be everyone has a veto, and it's an unlimited number of vetoes.
Yeah. And it's also one actually thing we should point out about that as well. That is because we're talking about session 0, right? Session 0s, typically the session 0, they come before the campaign even starts, and we set up the expectations of what's to come. A session 0 is technically never over, as far as I'm concerned. At any point, you can come to the DM, and particularly when it comes to this kind of stuff we're talking about now, the social contract. At any point, you can approach the DM and you can say, "Hey, I didn't think of this back when we did session 0, a few months ago, but this thing came up last session, and I thought it was I wasn't cool with it." You can do that. You can totally approach your DM. You can say that, and your DM, if they're even a halfway decent DM, will respect your boundaries and say, "Cool. When we come back in next session, we'll brush past that really fast, and then we'll get back into something else."
Or like, God forbid, something's happened, and it's sort of things are getting a little too close to your real life in the game life.
Yeah.
Speak up. Tell your DM immediately. Again, if they're in any way, not even a decent DM, a decent person, they'll accept and understand. And I think we can leave like the really heavy stuff there for now, because I don't want to totally end on very very heavy stuff like that. It is very important.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I think the more lighthearted stuff, I think like the golden rule, just don't be a dick.
Yeah, basically. I mean, like I said at the start when I was talking about the one shot, like there was a competitive nature that was brought in.
Yeah. D&D is
not a competitive game.
It's collaborative.
You can't win D&D. If you win D&D when you have fun, but not at the expense of other people's fun. So, you know.
Yeah. Don't be a dick, and you're not the main character. Those are the two golden rules of D&D.
You are one of X number of main characters.
Yes, you are not.
You're part of a party of people, and every single one of you is equal parts the main character.
You are a main character, not the main character.
There you go.
Yeah. Because I only mention it because there's a great video on a YouTube channel called Manny Kudos. It's spelled Kudos. And he did his video. It's the Manny Scandals of D&D. And I would highly encourage anyone to watch it because it's very, very interesting. Actually talks about some stuff that we talked about in our Satanic Panic episode, which is super interesting. But the number one thing on the Manny Scandals of D&D, spoiler, is Orion Akaba.
I was going to say Adam Coble.
No, Orion Akaba.
I guess critical. See, I don't.
Because that isn't D&D. That was a different game.
Oh, was it not? Okay, so I didn't even watch that series, but they were playing. They were playing some other RPG. Yeah. That's fair enough.
But like, the number one entry was Orion Akaba, and it was literally like, I think that's the biggest lesson you could take. Like, if like he was so infuriating to play with that they kicked him out, and now they have an Amazon Prime show and an $11 million Kickstarter, and he just has Tiberius Stormwind.
Yeah. I was actually watching that again recently because I went back when the animated show came out. I went back and I started watching some of the Briarwood arc in the lead up to it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the time that Orion leaves the show. And watching it back, at the time I don't think I'd picked up on it too much, but again I wouldn't like. I typically watch the show in the background, kind of. I'm not always like glued to the screen like that. I'm listening, but I'm not like watching very intently. And I think my first time through watching that, I remember thinking, I remember thinking, is Travis okay? Because Travis is like really wants to, like, he's very impatient. Or he really wants to get going with the quest for some reason, you know. And then looking back at it now, I'm like, oh, he's controlling himself, because if I was at that table, I'd lose my absolute marbles. That was actually Travis being very, very patient and very restrained, but just reaching the end of his rope because someone at the table was not being respectful of other people's time and other people's wants and stuff like that, and was very much making it about them.
Yeah, and there's a myriad other issues as well that jumped into mind when discussing about.
We won't get into them in detail because there's a lot of speculation out there as well. But feel free to Google on that and have a look.
It is just a great video anyway. It's a really interesting video. But if you specifically want to know about the Orion Akaba stuff and why being such a negative player can really screw you out of it in the long run. Number one entry there gives really good detail on it. It's session 0, super important. And then just like the social contract. Yeah, I think the social contract is probably the most important thing about D&D.
You want people to be comfortable.
Yeah.
You want people to. It's a game. We get together. Sometimes it's escapism. Sometimes it's just for us to hang out with our friends and have fun. Sometimes it's for us to kind of fulfill a kind of fun fantasy that we want to be the hero and the wizard or whatever. And I think that it should be that, and it should be comfortable. It should always be enjoyable. It should never be a place of stress or discomfort, or it should never be a place that you feel you need to walk away from, or you should feel that it should be a safe space.
Yeah.
And I know that triggers some assholes on the internet when you use the term safe space, but a safe space is a good thing. Your house is a safe space, a police station is a safe space, and a hospital is we'll take back that one. A hospital is a safe space. You know, these are places that like you can go where you're like, I'm probably okay here, you know, but like, so that's a whole other argument I can have with the internet. Your table should be a safe space.
You shouldn't have to brace yourself to play D&D.
Yes, you shouldn't have to suck it up or get over it or move past it or ignore it. You should be able to come to the table and you should be able to just enjoy everything that you experience with your friends at that table in the imaginary world that you play in.
Yeah.
But Martin.
Yes, Conor.
That's all the time we have for today.
Whew, we got a bit serious there at the end, but I think it was necessary. And
we got a bit serious at the end because we talked a lot of crap early on. We just got on a load of different tangents.
We talked a lot of rope this session, but we also talked about a lot of really important stuff. Just before we go, there is one quote. It's a quote from the drummer of Metallica, Lars Ulrich, that I think perfectly reflects what you were saying there.
Over.
And it was, so they did a documentary then making the album Saint Anger, and through the whole process of making that, one of them was in rehab, everyone was fighting with each other, it was just not a fun time. They still made the album. Was very poorly received, but like one of the things he said in that documentary was, I don't want to have to put on armor to go and fight James Hetfield about a verse. And I think that's perfect for D&D. I don't want to put on armor to roll dice.
Yeah.
Unless we're cosplaying our characters, because then that would be rad.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I don't want to have to prep for a fight when I'm prepping for D&D. Exactly. I don't want to have to prep to be emotionally tough when I should just be able to go and hang out with my friends.
Yes, indeed. So with that said, Conor, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet at 0.Conor, ZEROPOINTCONOR, 1N, very important. You can also find me here on the Micflayers podcast every Friday at 6 p.m. Irish time on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Breaker, and Radio Republic. Martin, where can people find you on the internet?
Nicely done on the list, by the way. You can mostly find me on the internet, on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over, which is in the bottom right hand corner there, and also on the Micflayers Twitter account. I nearly didn't get that out of my mouth, which is at MicFlayersPod. And mostly you can find me here on the Micflayers podcast every Friday at 6 p.m. Irish time. And with that, we'll see you that time next week for another episode of the Micflayers podcast. Later, folks.
Later, folks.